Well, it's time for our first full midweek preview and prediction show from the 24-25 EFL Championship season as we return today to look ahead to match week 8, which takes place as the first match week across October between Tuesday the 1st and Wednesday the 2nd, as we've got a full fixture list across Tuesday and Wednesday. We're going to have a look ahead to all 12 matches, preview the games and predict the scores. And as always, I'll encourage you to get involved down in the comments. And if you beat or match my overall score across the 12 matches, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be out on Thursday evening, looking ahead to the weekend action. For now though, hopefully you're looking forward to this one. We've got to go and have a quick look back before we go ahead to the midweek games and have a look at what happened this weekend in match week 7, which has just finished as I'm recording this, having just watched Swansea v Bristol City. That one gave a lot of you a chance to catch up with me, to be honest, because I was second place going into the final day of the weekend. Unfortunately, though, a lot of you predicted the 1-1 scoreline. My perfect score across 7 points in total, though, came for Middlesbrough's win at home to Stoke by 2-0. Tough start for them under their new manager. And I also picked up points for 3 home wins for Blackburn, Leeds and for Millwall, as well as the 0-0 between Oxford and Burnley, where I'd gone for a Championship's favourite scoreline. And of course, there was only one this weekend. Let's have a look at how you guys got on though, because it was a very similar weekend for most of us. Lots of people between 5 and 7 points. 7 of you level with me on 7 overall. David B, Nigel, Calvin, Jimmo, Peter, Gordon and Paul all on 7 points. Lots of you getting the Borough score or the one on Sunday for Swansea Bristol City. However, 5 of you are above me in the table this week. Theo and Darren are on 8 apiece, so well done to you, pipping us by a point. One of you due to that 1-1 scoreline as well. On 9, we've got our joint second place, Bobby and Disguy. 2 perfect scores for each of you, 9 points overall. But we have a runaway leader. The one with 2 perfect scores and a weekend garnering 12 points. Mitchell, one of our regular players. Borough and Watford, the perfect scores for you. And 12 points, only 3 games where you didn't get the correct outcome. An incredible effort, a great weekend for you. But can you back it up on Tuesday and Wednesday? Well, let's see, because we start on Tuesday night with a battle of promotion favourites v relegation favourites at the start of the season. But is that the case now? It is Burnley versus Plymouth Argyle. Burnley played against Oxford at the weekend, a 0-0 draw. Yes, I'm deliberately starting with them as a Luton fan. They probably just about shaded the chances created. They had a lot more shots and a lot more possession against Oxford, who, to be fair, didn't show a lot of ambition to attack, but tactically they were very sensible. They've played that way in a few of the playoff games last year, and Burnley couldn't really break them down. They had one very good chance, to my knowledge. They had 1 shot on target, and they missed a couple of opportunities, but it was the same old story for Burnley, wasn't it? We mentioned the 5-0 against Cardiff, the 4-1 against Luton. A little misleading in terms of the quality and the number of chances created. And I know it sounds stupid to say as the 3rd highest scorer so far this season, but they're still not entirely convincing and clicking in front of goal. They're very good at the other end though, which is important. And coming up this midweek against the Plymouth side, who continue their unbeaten home start under Wayne Rooney with a really good performance against Luton Town. They did cause West Brom a few problems on the road the week before, albeit they gave up lots of chances. And a similar story in this one, to be honest. I know Luton had some of the better chances, missed a hatful of good opportunities. We'll get to that later. But Plymouth were a constant attacking threat. They were pressing well. You can see the difference in their game plan at home. And we suggested pre-season that Wayne Rooney, this might be the job for him. And it does seem to be edging that way. Sissoko was fantastic off the bench, and he has got his team selection a bit better in recent weeks, reintroducing a few of the familiar names from the start, your Edwards, your Hardy, your Mumbas, and then later on introducing the new faces who are able to make a bit of a difference. In the end, you can't begrudge them the win. It was a really, really good performance. And I was particularly impressed with the way they defended the 15 corners and several other free kicks during the game. Really good signs from Plymouth, but on the road, been a lot trickier this year. Beaten heavily at Sheffield Wednesday, Watford in the Cup, West Brom. The only result they really got was when they were defending with 9 or 10 men against QPR. So this one's going to be tough for them. I don't think it's going to be a battering, no. Plymouth have pleasantly surprised me so far, but I'm going to go for Burnley to win comfortably, if not spectacularly, by 2-0 at Turf Moor. Now I'm creating a risk here because the midweek championship fixture lists are generally a little lower scoring, but I've gone for goals in pretty much all the games here. As we move on to the second one, managerless Cardiff still at the time of recording on Sunday are home to Millwall, who are scoring more goals than many of us would have ever expected pre-season. They beat Preston by 3-1, a late red card putting a bit of a blotch on the record, but a first home goal for SA, a brilliant young player from the academy. Langstaff getting a goal as well, starting to step up and adjust to championship level. And I know Preston weren't great, they haven't been for a while, but Millwall played the way we expected, gave up a lot of possession, but got the ball directly into areas where they can make a difference. They created good chances, they scored good goals, and just looked a really decent side on the counter. Thoroughly impressed with them so far going forward. A few iffy displays at the back early in the season, but they're starting to put that right a little bit too. And overall, I've been very encouraged as they go into a game against Cardiff, who, of course, as we mentioned, and it sort of influenced my prediction at the weekend, could have a manager in by Tuesday night. And boy, do they probably need it based on that, because after Errol Balut leaves, nothing changes. A 4-1 defeat at Hull City. I mean, they went 1-0 up, and the way they defended after that was pretty shambolic. It wasn't actually that one-sided a game. It was a pretty even match in terms of the stats, but every time Hull attack, they look like scoring. Cardiff, they're a bit all over the place. They need someone to come in, give them an identity, try and get them on the front foot, because they're not defensively solid enough to cope with sitting behind the ball. And it's going to be a very tough season for them if they don't organise that soon. But for this game, based on the fact there's no new Cardiff manager in yet, and based on the fact that even if they do, they might not have a training session, I know it's the sort of game that can always fool us, but I have to go for Millwall. I'm going to go comfortable by 2-0. The only positive for Cardiff is at least they scored at the weekend. As we move on to two sides that have had very different starts to this championship season. Coventry City, slow starters against the high-flying Blackburn Rovers. A really good 2-0 win for them against QPR. And sort of answered a question that we asked after the Preston game the week before, where they couldn't break down 10 men. They couldn't get in behind a deep defence. And I know QPR offered a few more gaps and a little bit more ambition, but they dominated the game and they made the chances count. Yes, set pieces played a crucial part, but really big goals from players outside the attacking areas, and they were thoroughly good value for their victory. Blackburn at home under John Eustace, never a doubt. And I know in the comments a couple of you are giving me a bit of stick for the fact that we predicted them down there at the start of the season. But can I point out that was in July, when we knew Schmodix was going, but we didn't see what replacements were coming in. And some of the signings since, including the second goal scorer Danny Bath, have been really good ones to the spine of the team. Very good start for them. Away from home, few different questions to be asked, but Coventry, not the quickest starters. Now, 5 without a win in all competitions, 4 of those in the Championship. A 3-0 defeat at Leeds was very comfortable. It was very much a one-sided game. They had a little bit more of the ball, but created very little with it. And if Leeds again had had their shooting boots on, it could have been a pretty embarrassing game. We know Coventry always start slow, but they can't afford to keep losing this much ground at the start of the year. I just feel this might be a bit of a thriller. I know it's 3 clean sheets in a row for Blackburn, but there's mitigation that 2 of those were against 10 men for a long period, and Bristol City have been abysmal on the road this year. So I'm going to go for a bit of a thriller here. I called one right at the weekend with Sheffield Wednesday West Brom. I'm going to go for the same score prediction in this one, which almost came off there. I'm going to go for 2 goals apiece at the CBS. As I move to Kenilworth Road, and I'm just fearful of the predictions now, it is Luton Town versus Oxford United. Oxford, we mentioned it a bit earlier on, a creditable 0-0 against Burnley. Showed none to very little attacking intent, but defensively, so good tactically. And again, given the fact they'd won all their home games prior to that, against sides you'd maybe expect to be in and around that bottom half. A 0-0 draw against Burnley is not bad. And if they can pick up 40 to 45 points at home this season, which is a big ask, but not impossible, then that is going to be the cornerstone of them surviving. Because so far, they've not looked like picking up many on the road. Luton Town didn't pick up any on the road on Friday though. A 3-1 defeat against Plymouth Argyle. Again, a similar story. Giving up really poor chances. Looking like conceding on the counter-attack with his high-pressing man-for-man system. Lost Ted Mengi to injury after Amari Bell was already out. And that pace has just zapped out the back line. From last year when Luton were at their best, it was Mengi, Bell and it was Osho. All of those have pace in abundance. And at the back now, when you look at the 3 that came on or finished the game, Mads Anderson obviously picked up another knock, but McGuinness as well, Walters tucking in at centre-half. There's just not those legs there, and that is a really big concern. The positive, Victor Moses got his first goal and yet again looked fantastic off the bench. I would be very surprised if he doesn't start this match. But Luton did win their last home game against Sheffield Wednesday. Hopefully Morris will be back in midweek. You can see the confidence just isn't there in Adebayo's finishing, but it's normally about the start of October. He hits form and then suddenly becomes a regular goal scorer. For Oxford, on the road, it's been a story of narrow defeats this year. So I'm going to cross my fingers. I'm going to let heart rule head again. I'm going to hope for a 2-1 Luton win. We had some cracking games back in the National League days when we were struggling to get out the conference and Oxford United were doing the job. I'm going to go for Luton to edge this game. On to the fifth game of the night. Another side in yellow. Norwich City against Leeds United. Leeds comprehensive against Coventry. A really good 3-0 win. Very good performance. They look strong. And I predicted them pre-season for the title and have absolutely no doubts in it from what we've seen so far. I know there's the odd game where they're not taking chances, but Pirro in that more advanced role starting to take some chances now, which is a good sign. Nonto looking a threat. The fullback's more aggressive than last season. If they can get Matteo Joseph scoring as well, they might be in for a bit of a treat the rest of this year. But Leeds United looking very good. The Norwich City game, though, a bit harder to judge. We mentioned the fact that they were really good against Watford, their first excellent performance of the season. And they've been better at home ever since they've been back in the Championship. But last year under David Wagner, brilliant home record, atrocious on the road. They did win away at Derby by 3-2, a Sainz hat-trick, but I've no idea how we can judge that because 3 of the goals in that game shouldn't have stood. It was a very tough day for the officials there, to say the least. But while Norwich's first goal shouldn't have counted, while 2 of the 3 were out of play at some point in the move, in the end they got the win. It was a good result and 3 crucial points on the board. And they can only play to the whistle. And they did their job well. Borja Sainz looking fantastic. The worry is what happens if he gets injured. I think this is going to be a tight game. Norwich are more front-footed at home. Leeds, we know, can be aggressive on the break. We saw them play in the playoffs last year, but Norwich are a different sort of proposition now. They keep the ball a bit more. And I think that might suit Leeds on the counter-attack. I'm going to go for them to edge this game, Leeds, but only just by 2-1. Relies on them taking their chances, though, which is not always the case this year. Let's move on to a game between 2 sides in that midsection of the table, but 2 teams that have had a very different couple of weeks. It is QPR versus Hull City. Tim Walter backed up his first win away at Stoke, that comeback, with another comeback victory, this time at home to hapless Cardiff. From 1-0 down to 4-1 up, yes, including a couple of gifts again. I mean, you won't be able to believe the luck he's had in some of the chances they've been gifted the last 2 matches. But in the end, a good performance from Hull. Still giving up far too much at the back, which worries me against better opposition. But they took chances. Bellumi just starting to show signs. Zambrano got a goal as well. Late penalty's a big bonus. And a first goal for Bedia as well. So positives there, but still a few concerns at the back. For QPR, no win in their last 4 since Luton in August. In fact, they'll be happy September's over. A 2-0 defeat at Blackburn. A second half against 11 men with 10. That late red card in the first half really cost them. They just didn't defend well with 10. And in the end, they fell to a comfortable defeat. They were obviously the second best team against Millwall, which is definitely a concern for them. And they only snatched a point at Sheffield Wednesday in the 96th minute. So the performances aren't quite there yet. But the club are well behind Cifuentes, as are the fans. And it will take time, but they'll get going. And I think they'll have a very comfortable year. For this game, despite the fact Hull have had a good week, and despite the fact QPR haven't won in 4 in all competitions, I'm still going to go for QPR to pick up a result. They've been hard to beat this year. They've only lost 2 games. And although they had a poor performance, if they can keep 11 on the pitch, I think they will get chances and beat Hull. If they press them high with Frey up front, they'll create opportunities. I'm going for QPR to win this one by 2-1. As we move into the second half, for Sunderland versus Derby County, Sunderland will be glad to be back at home after 2 successive away defeats. The one away at Plymouth, followed by defeat away at Watford. Very poor first half performance, a much more even second half. And in the end, it probably should have been a higher scoring game than it was. Still moments for Sunderland. It was one of the first games where they actually had a bit more of the ball. And we are starting to see that is perhaps a little bit of a pattern for Sunderland in the Watford game and also in the Plymouth game, where they've had just over 50% of the ball. They've struggled a bit more. They've generally been winning when they've been a low possession team. So Sunderland again relying on that counter-attacking style. We saw that under Mowbray. We're seeing it under Regis Lebris. For Derby, as I mentioned, it's a little bit harder to call because that 3-2 game against Norwich, the first goal was so important on the stroke of half-time. The ball was very comfortably out of play. Unfortunately, it was on the assistant side, which makes it quite hard, but officials make mistakes. One of Derby's goals shouldn't have counted. Another of Norwich's goals went out of play at the other end, albeit should have been defended better on the counter. It was a very tough game to call. So for Derby County, look, are generally a very good start at home. Away, they've not shown much ambition this year, and I think we know what they're going to do. They're going to come and sit behind the ball. They'll invite Sunderland to have possession, try and break Derby down. And we've seen that's when Sunderland have struggled a bit more this year. So could be a little bit of a difficult game based on that. I do think Derby might get a chance or two on the counter. May suit them as well. We saw on that opening day against Blackburn when a team came at them, they were great creating space in behind. So I'm going to go for a tighter game than many predict, but Sunderland have been brilliant at home so far. So instead of the last two where they won by 1-0, I'm going to go for 2-1 to Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. And the blockbuster game at the end of Tuesday evening, two sides that myself and Craig both put in the playoffs, I think, this year. Certainly I did. It's West Bromwich Albion against Middlesbrough at the Hawthorns. Middlesbrough with a comfortable 2-0 win at home to Stoke. Ben Doak on his first start looking very promising, certainly for the first 45. And Hackney getting a second to make it a comfortable win against, let's be honest, a very poor Stoke side. But I do still have the same worry about Borough. The strikers weren't scoring. 26 shots, nearly 10 on target, and just not taking opportunities. It's going to be the story of Borough's season as it was last year. If they don't have the same injuries, they'll probably be a bit more solid at the back, but they've got to find a way to take these opportunities because there's already 3 or 4 games this season that they should have won by 3, 4 or 5, and they haven't. So for Borough, they're in the mix, but they've got to find a way to click because 8 goals from the number of chances they've created is just not enough. For West Brom, bizarre game at Sheffield Wednesday. We kind of called the thriller, didn't we? And having fought back from 2-0 to 2-2, where I was jumping for joy at a brilliant perfect score prediction, well, it looks like West Brom were over celebrating too because they went straight and conceded a minute later. It's a really good game. I called it would be. West Brom had bundles of the ball. Sheffield Wednesday tried to hit them on the break, and they did. And in the end, they just came out on the wrong side of it. A very un-West Brom-like defensive display. Struggled with the pace a little at the back, but look, they've had a really good start to the season. They're still top of the league, and they'll still be in that top 6 this year. They'll bounce back at home for me. I just don't trust Borough to take chances, and they're not going to get many at West Brom. We know they normally win by 1 or 2 goals to nil at the Hawthorns. I'm going to go for 1 goal to nil, which will be their 3rd successive one at home. As we move on to the 4 remaining games on Wednesday night, we start with Preston North End versus Watford. The honeymoon's over, isn't it, for Preston North End? Excitement after beating Luton and that heavy win against Harrogate in the Cup in their first 2 games. Just 3 draws and 2 defeats since in all competitions. And unfortunately, a disappointing 3-1 defeat at Millwall. Really poor display. And again, offered so little going forward for the most part. They did open up a little bit later on. They had a lot of the ball, created a couple of chances. As Magic obviously charged for the bite, which absolutely rightly so. I mentioned it last week. I'm not going to absolutely cane the man, but it wasn't a good look. You've got to be honest. A defeat there followed a few games where they looked pretty uninspiring going forward, but against Middlesbrough, they sat in and defended. Against Blackburn with 10 men, they'll say a draw's a decent result. For Watford, really important they bounce back after a run of difficult games. Obviously, those away defeats at Sheffield United and Norwich, no shame in them, but the manner of the Norwich one was a little bit alarming. Home to Sunderland, though, a really good game of football. And Tom Cleverley does seem to be improving Watford and giving them a bit of an identity, which has been long lacking for a couple of years now. So lots of positives to take so far this season, but they're still going to be inconsistent with a relatively young side with a fair few new players in there. He's going to need time, and hopefully he'll be given that. Even from a Luton fan point of view, you want to see young managers doing well. And Cleverley obviously has been a great servant of the club. So hopefully for their sake, he is given a little bit of time to get it right. And so far, it's been a positive start. For this game, I have to throw one in the midweek, and I don't really know what to go for because Watford's last couple of away displays haven't been great. Preston love a draw at home. There's not normally many goals in them. Watford away from home have tended to score 1 a game. So I'm going to go for the Championship's favourite scoreline. Hasn't been the last couple of match weeks. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. The final 3 begins with one of the pre-season promotion favourites. They started on -2 and have worked their way up, but it was a frustrating weekend for Sheffield United, who host Swansea City. Sheffield United held by Portsmouth away from home. Really interesting game, actually, because Portsmouth sat behind the ball. And maybe unlike some of the other teams that have gone to Pompey, and I include the likes of Luton in that who didn't win the game, Sheffield United didn't really create many brilliant chances. And that was perhaps the difference. Portsmouth were putting their bodies on their line. They were working hard defensively. And Sheffield United just couldn't break it down, which has maybe been a concern the last couple of games. Obviously, a 1-0 the previous match, where it was fairly tight against Derby. How are they going to be able to beat teams that set up defensively and low behind the ball? For Swansea City, a little bit different. They're going to try and play out from the back, keep a bit of possession, which for me is definitely going to play into Sheffield United's hands. But for Swansea City, a 1-1 draw at home to Bristol City, another game at home they're leading and throw it away. And actually, after they conceded in the second half, they were the second best side for the most of it. They really struggled to deal with conceding a goal. They were under massive pressure for 10 or so minutes after it. It was only really the final 5 that wrestled back a little bit of control. So Swansea have got to turn those first half performances into full game ones, but still been a solid start for them. Both teams will be happy with where they are at the moment. But for me, Sheffield United are the favourites here. Swansea will play into their hands a little bit more than perhaps Derby and Pompey did. I think Sheffield United will get an extra goal as a result. So I'm going to go for 2-0 to the home side and a comfortable win at Bramall Lane. As we move on to the penultimate game, which is the one involving the side that Sheffield United drew with. It is Stoke City versus Portsmouth. Let's talk about Pompey first, as we just discussed that game. Set up in a very sensible way against Sheffield United. Managed to defend deep, managed to restrict space, and got a really creditable 0-0 draw. This has been a decent start for Pompey. We mentioned those first 7 games on paper. They played 6 of the 7 promotion favourites. They've picked up 4 draws and only actually lost 3. I think that's a really creditable effort. But as many have said, the season starts here. They come up against the Stoke City side who have looked really poor in the last 2 games since Nasi Palak came in. I'm still not sure sacking Schumacher is the right decision. In fact, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But it's going to take time to adapt. And we saw last season with the likes of Birmingham and Sunderland, you've got to pick up results while you're doing so. For Stoke, a 2-0 defeat at Middlesbrough after that 3-1 defeat against Hull. There were moments of a promise in that first half against Hull. Against Middlesbrough, there weren't many at all. 1 or 2 threats on the counter-attack, but Borough dominated the game. And they looked like scoring every time they attacked, albeit they didn't have a finisher. If they did, it could have got ugly. So for a Pompey side who are relatively solid at times, particularly away from home though, they've looked more of a threat on the break. A number of their championship goals have come away from home. A really good performance away at Borough, looked a threat at Burnley as well, gave them a run for their money. And obviously that opening day where they got 3 at Leeds, they've only actually scored 1 of their 7 goals at home this year. So Pompey are a threat on the break. Stoke City, we saw against Hull, if they concede a goal, they become incredibly vulnerable. And it gives Pompey a chance. I think the first goal is so crucial in this game. And if Pompey get it, I'm going to predict them to nick a win. I think the Stoke are going to be under pressure here. After sacking Schumacher, after an okay start in my book, I think things are going to get tough. They could fall into the relegation zone depending on other results. If Pompey beat them, they'll leapfrog them. I'm going Portsmouth by 2-1. And the final game, the 8 PM kickoff on Wednesday night, it is Bristol City versus Sheffield Wednesday. I mentioned it, what a game on Saturday lunchtime for Sheffield Wednesday. A 3-2 win against West Brom. Concerns and moments of promise as well. Looked a real threat on the counter in the first half. Gave a West Brom defence problems that they don't normally have. And from going back from 2-0 to 2-2, it would have been so easy for their heads to drop. But straight from the kickoff, they were on the front foot. And they did what QPR did to them. They nicked a late sucker punch. They got a 3-2 win. And for Sheffield Wednesday, a really good moment for them because they've had some tough results despite decent performances. We mentioned what happened with the handball at Luton the week before, where a draw probably would have been fair. So for me, a really good result for them. Tactically very well set up. Let West Brom have a lot of the ball and then try to hit them on the break. And a similar story for them after a very tough start on paper. They've now got some games that are winnable. For Bristol City, they've had a very decent start to the season at home. They've struggled on the road, albeit they were a bit better against Swansea. In the first half, they struggled again. They were a little bit passive. But in the second period, particularly after they got the equaliser, they could have gone on and won it. Had a couple of great chances. I mentioned Sinclair Armstrong again. Looks a real threat. Really presses well, makes great runs, but just not that natural finisher. We saw that once when he went in one-on-one with Vigoro, the keeper. But on the break, Bristol City looking threatening. Definitely a much better setup on the road in that second half. Gave up the ball, created chances, and should have won the game. There's no doubt about it with the chances they created in the end. They will still be a bit concerned defensively. Clean sheets are a very rare thing for them. And they have conceded a lot of goals in their last 6. They've conceded 3 times, haven't they? and overall 12 goals in those 6 matches. So this is going to be an interesting one to finish. I think this is a hard one to call. Could go either way. Wouldn't be shocked at 2-1 to either side. I'm going to finish by sitting on the fence with 1-1 at Ashton Gate. So with that out the way, let's have a quick recap of what we've gone for in match week 8, the first full midweek fixture list of the season. I've gone for comfortable wins for the likes of Burnley, Millwall at currently managerless Cardiff, and for Sheffield United at home to Swansea, all 3 of those by 2-0. West Brom to get back to their solid defensive displays with a clean sheet and a 1-0 win at home to Borough, and 2 Championship's favourite scorelines between Preston and Watford, and Bristol City and Sheffield Wednesday to finish. Those are just my predictions for match week 8 though. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions and your scores for match week 8. If you beat or match my overall score across the 12 games, you will get a shout out in Thursday's recap as we look ahead to the weekend fixtures and match day 9 before the international break. But in the meantime, we may well have a Cardiff City manager special. We'll wait and see on that front. For now, thank you very much for watching as always. Chuck a thumbs up, subscribe, turn that notification bell on and all that stuff. Get your score predictions in. I hope to see you playing in your numbers as always. I'll see you back here on Thursday afternoon for match week 9. But for now, have a good midweek and enjoy the first midweek feast of Championship football this season.